Hello everybody, Jim's Kitchen on tour. Time for a chat with the great Ken Nicol. Ken is one of the greatest, and I mean the greatest guitar players around, and it's a great honour for me to be here today. I first saw you, Ken, about 20 years ago, I think, at Southport Floral Hall, playing lead guitar with Steel Ice Band, and I thought, that was fantastic. I actually sent you an email. You might not remember that. I sent you an email, 20 odd, and you replied to it straight away. You said, thanks very much, and I didn't realise that you came from the Northwest, because I think Steel Ice Band are predominantly southern people out there.
Well, it depends. I mean, I think probably in the past they were based more in the south, but now Maddie and Rick are up near Carlisle way, yeah.
But I was struck with that show, and particularly one of the songs that you did, and you've had some associations with the Horton Weavers as well. But I think maybe for people who watch this page, they may not know the full extent of your musical experience. Can you give us a bit of a background?
Well, I remember that gig well, actually, back in, that would be 2002.
All right, so 22 years.
2002, and that was, it was, I'd been playing this guitar show in Penrith for years. It was actually then called the Cumbria Guitar Show, and I did a little spot each year representing file guitars.
File, yes.
Yeah, and this one year, after I'd done my set, Rick Kemp, who was the bass player in Steel Eye, he approached Roger Bucknell, who makes file guitars, who's the boss, and Rick wanted to get in touch with me.
Right.
So we spoke, and it just so happened that he'd heard my set, he liked the playing, and at that time Bob Johnson, who was the previous guitar player,
yes,
had decided he wasn't touring with Steel Eye, and so Rick said, "Do you fancy stepping into his shoes?"
It's a big name, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's what I did. And what happened was Rick gave me this the double album that they'd recorded, and I think it was called the Reunion Tour. So it was when Maddie came back into the band. She'd been out of the band for a while, and so they'd sort of come together again for this reunion tour, doing a lot of the old songs, but they'd re-recorded them. So I'd given a double album and told just to learn it all. So I used to, this is when I lived in Preston, and I had my studio. I had a double garage that I'd converted into a studio. And I just used to go in there every morning, put the album on, just play through the whole thing.
So did they not send you any? I mean, I'm a lot lower down the ladder in ability musically. So if somebody did that to me, I couldn't do it. They'd have to send me the chords and everything. Did they not send you chords and stuff?
No, not good.
You just had to listen to it, and
I just had to listen to it and work it all out. Yeah. But I mean, I've done a lot of that over the years.
Yeah.
And so, there are lots of patterns that you become familiar with and everything. But there are obviously some tricky corners, as they say, timing-wise. A lot of the old Steel Eye stuff, basically written by Bob Johnson, has some timing events that take some working out. But it's good. It's very very testing. But it was a great experience.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. What was the lineup of the group then? What were the instruments in the group apart from you?
Well, it was Liam Ginocchi on drums.
Yeah.
Rick Kemp on bass, Peter Knight on
the
fiddle,
and
Maddie.
And Maddie singing.
Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah. I remember, because I saw you, I just couldn't remember everybody's name.
I loved some of that old material. I mean, the funny thing was I never really got that familiar with Steel Eye up until that time, but boy, I enjoyed playing some of those songs.
The sound was fabulous. Did you play electric guitar all the time?
Pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird because I would say I'm more of an acoustic player than an electric player, but that's the nature of the band. Yeah.
Well, can we go back a bit in time? I know it's a cliche, but where did it all start? What was your first sort of influences? The first when you got into playing?
Well, it was. I was very inspired by music generally when I was in my very early teens, maybe even a little bit before the teens. But my mum my mum and dad won on the football pools. They won 50 quid.
Fantastic.
It was a lot of money back then. And they bought a record player, one of those, you know, where you stack the records on top and they drop down, you know. And I can remember we borrowed all these 78s from somebody across Deepdale Road, a relative or something, and you know, I was listening to 78s like Jerry Lee Lewis and things like that, you know, and I just used to love this stuff. And so I was always asking for instruments, you know. I wanted things bought for me, like and eventually I got a guitar bought for me, and that was it really. I just enjoyed playing the guitar.
That's because like Jerry Lee Lewis and a lot of the musicians from back then, there was a lot of piano involved. So did you ever do any piano work?
I didn't. No. It's funny, and I just didn't hanker after that.
No,
but that time when I was, I also had a sister who was 6 years older than me, and so when I was 12, she went off to university in London. I used to bring back all these albums, like Bob Dylan albums and blues, you know, lots of blues music. And it wasn't long after that I got into things like John Renbourn and Bert Jansch, and I used to spend hours after tea, as we called it then, in the kitchen. I used to close the door with the record player there and just go over bits again and again, and I'd work out all these guitar figures. So
were you aware in those early days that you had an ability?
No,
or did you just think
no, it was just pure enthusiasm. That's you know, I just loved it, and I think what it was is I just found certain things moving. I mean, the Beatles, obviously, I got to the Beatles big time, but certain areas of music really sort of moved me, you know, and so I suppose that you know, at times I felt like I was in touch with the divine or something, you know, with the shivers and
especially with Beatles stuff. Some of that stuff with Beatles, some of those chords, you think, oh God, it affects you, doesn't it? You know?
It does, it does. Yeah.
Well, I was talking with Anthony John Clark last night about when I bought an LP called Highway 61 Revisited when I first bought it.
I bought that as well.
I saved up £1.10, and that's a lot.
Is that the one where it was acoustic on one side and electric?
No, that's bringing it all back home.
Bringing it all back.
But Highway 61, he sat up front with a Triumph T-shirt on, but I saved up £1.10, which was a lot of money. But when I got that LP, I was walking around West Stark with it under my arm. Because you couldn't hear that music unless you bought it.
No.
Like today, we've got the internet, we've got all sorts of different ways of hearing stuff. But in them days, like when you said your mum got that record player and you were listening to those records, that's the only way you could have listened to that music.
And so much of that music was completely fresh, completely fresh. We'd not heard anything like it up until that time, and that was what was so fantastic about that era, I think. You know, now our senses are just bombarded from like all directions.
Too much of everything, isn't it? I think so, because when something's hard to get and it's sort of valuable, like every time I heard a particular song, I had to actually buy it. It's very rare that the songs I were interested in would be on BBC Radio, and they just wouldn't be on.
No,
you might occasionally, if you were lucky, but you had to buy it or borrow it from somebody.
Well, that's right. You know. That's right. Yeah, and another thing I remember is that program Ready Steady Go. Remember that?
Yeah.
And again, it was so much of that music was new and inspiring.
Yeah, it made. I mean, I know. I think probably every generation think, "Oh, my generation, we had the best music and all that." But you know, I do think that we were very lucky to be around at that time when artists such as Bob Dylan and such as the Beatles. And the Rolling Stones and the Kinks. I love the Kinks. Beach Boys. I mean, what sort of other groups did you like at that time? Were there other?
Well, I loved I can remember watching the Yardbirds on Ready Steady Go, loving that stuff. And the Blues Breakers album. I was like 15 at the time when the Blues Breakers album came up with Clapton playing in a way that none of us had really heard before. It was, but then it wasn't long after that I got into American music. Well, a lot of that was American music, but things like Steely Dan and James Taylor, for example. Yeah.
So when did you start playing for money?
I think I was probably about 16 when I first got.
That's great.
paid
No,
for a
that's
gig,
great to get money. I mean, I'm not obsessed with money, but I think you're doing something you love, something that you're quite good at, and somebody gives you some money. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, it's good.
You're entertaining people and you're getting paid for it.
Yeah. It doesn't happen too much these days.
I know, sorry. Tell me about it. But yeah, so you, I presume that what was your first paid booking? Was that just a local?
It's hard to remember the first. I could have been about 17 or 18 actually, but I'm not sure. Oh no, maybe 16. I don't know. There was a college in Lytham St Anne's. I used to jump on the bus and go and. I used to smoke those gitans.
Oh, gitans! I remember them. Yeah, they bloody stunk.
And I had a fur coat, so I put my fur coat on and put the gitan in the headstock of the guitar.
Yes, great, cool.
And I think I had a little earring as well. So that the whole image thing was kind of important for me then. But I fancied myself as a bit of a Bert Jansch.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And so I just used to sit there at this college on, I think it was a Friday evening. I just play. I wouldn't say anything. I just keep playing, and these people were sort of sat cross-legged in front of me, and it was all very, very cool, very innocent.
Because, I mean, I'm not comparing myself to you in any way at all. I'm just trying to. I'm comparing the sort of approach. When I first heard, my sister brought an LP home called The Freewheeling Bob Dylan for me and her Tony, and we were listening to Clancy Brothers, an Irish band. And when I heard Freewheeling Bob Dylan, it just blew my mind. I thought, I want to do that.
Yeah.
But my approach, I wasn't that musical, and I'm still not. But I knew I had to learn some basic rudimentary. I could play harmonica a bit, so I had to learn some chords, and then I could do things like Blowing in the Wind, And as soon as I'd learned a couple of chords, I had a metal colour tango with a harmonica sellotape to it, and playing. I thought, wow, I've arrived, But you're talking about Bert Jansch, and that's a different league altogether. So what? Did you pick that up by ear, or did you have lessons?
Well, there are a couple of things. One is that I think when I got my first guitar, my mum bought this guitar for me. It was a plastic guitar. It only had 4 strings.
Wow.
4 strings. So basically, it was like a ukulele.
Yeah.
But it came with a little booklet, and the booklet had these songs in like Little Brown Jug and Home on the Range and all that. And so you had these. It'd be like just playing chords on the top 4 strings of a guitar, a 6-string guitar. And probably in a day or two, I had all these chords out and I was playing them, and then I took to it so well, I suppose, that my mother then bought me a 6-string guitar very shortly afterwards. But harmonically, I could hear which notes went down the scale. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I was playing like a primitive F shape on the top 4 strings, but I could hear the right notes on the 5th and the 6th string. So I just added those instinctively,
See, now that is, as I was talking about before, about ability and talent, you probably didn't realise it at the time, but you had that, and a lot of people, including me, don't have that. I wouldn't have done that. I had to sort of learn it by rote. Somebody showed me a chord, I can do that, and then I can perform, because I want to get up and show off and sort of perform. But the actual ability or talent, musical talent, wasn't.
But there were other things as well that I had to learn in that way. For example, I mean, I'd already worked out bar chords before anyone showed me a bar chord. Okay, that's quite cool, isn't it? But a lot of the finger work and everything. I remember seeing a show called Hold Down Chord. John Pierce. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
But I remember what we called the claw hammer in those days. Not really the climber, really, in America is the banjo picking figure.
Yeah.
But we called it the claw hammer. It's really Travis picking.
Yes.
It's called Travis picking. But John Pierce said he was going to demonstrate the claw.
Can you just show it? Can you just play some Travis picking?
Sure,
yeah, just so we know what we're talking about.
Right. Well, the claw hammer, as John Pierce demonstrated it, he said he was going to show it in the. It was like I think it was something like 10 weeks of these programs,
right.
And he was going to demonstrate it in the final one.
Yeah. So you actually want to feel the now.
Yeah. So and I thought I was really desperate to learn how to keep the thumb going independently of the fingers. But what he did was he taught it as a sequence of events. So instead of like just trying to do one thing with the thumb and then do something completely different with the fingers, he demonstrated it like this, like thumb, finger, and then repeat that, but without that last note. So, and then when you start to give it some rhythm, it's like, okay, yeah. Now, when I learned that, then I made a lot of progress just by developing that technique, really.
Because I talked to Bernard Wrigley.
Yeah,
Do you know
I know Bernard.
Because he was sort of, we were talking about learning the basic chords, and he was similar to you. He was listening to some music, and he thought, if I can play the chord, I can play the bass with and I can play this melody with that. So getting more sophisticated, breaking through sort of that different level.
I always thought the contrast with Bernard is kind of funny because he's really into bands like Steely Dan. But when he performs his broad Lancashire,
He's great. But when did you sort of start getting more regular work and recognisable sort of?
Well, I was playing folk clubs through
solo.
In my late teens. Not like it wasn't full on. The work wasn't full on, but I was doing a fair number of gigs. But it was really the early 1970s when I moved to London. In 1974, that's when I teamed up with my brother-in-law at that time, Pete Marsh. And we got a deal with CBS Records, and we put a band together called Easy Street, and we toured with people like Loudon Wainwright, and Al Stewart, and people like that. Yeah.
Al Stewart,
yeah.
And you've also.
And then I was asked to join to tour with Al as the lead guitarist. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's something. Yeah, fantastic. I don't want to. I mean, we'll do this again because we can't cover everything in one chart. But I know that at some point you worked in America as well, didn't you?
Well, I moved to America in 1979.
Right.
Yeah. So we did this album on CBS in 1974, and then we signed with Polydor and made an album in 76, and one in 77. We had a minor hit in America at that time. And then the fourth album we made in 1978, we actually recorded in Los Angeles.
Wow. So
Polydor flew us over to LA, and for me at that time, that was an incredibly special time because I was recording with Lee Sklar, the bass player Lee Sklar from the James Taylor band, and Bill Payne from Little Feat, and Victor Feldman from Steely Dan. We were getting these musicians in every day, playing on our material, and it was quite an experience. And the album was really good, and that was the first album that wasn't really pushed at all. It was very typical. People tell these stories about acts, that played soft rock or whatever. That once punk came along. They didn't stand the chance, sort of thing, and we were a typical example of that.
Yeah, because it was a massive change.
Yeah.
But so how long were you in America for?
About 8 years.
Wow. And when you came back, I mean, I don't know. See, I don't know you well enough to know. But when you came back, were you just full-time music all the time, or were you doing other jobs and things?
Well, when I was in America, well, what happened was when I moved over there, I kind of, turned my back on years of networking and everything in this country.
Of course. Yeah.
And I ended up doing stuff like delivering phone books and selling sandwiches. I used to sell sandwiches, going from one office to the next with a cooler full of food and all this, and wondering what had happened to my life, sort of thing. It was a very difficult time.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
Because to have been in that studio in Los Angeles, playing with musicians like that, you must have thought, and I don't mean in a big Eddie way, but you must have thought, bloody hell, I'm here, sort of thing. And and for things not to have to have gone, it must have been
it was difficult, and my confidence took a real nosedive, and but this happens in life. You can have these spells where you just struggle personally.
So when you came back to England, you say you'd sort of broke off all your ties, your networking, so you were sort of starting from scratch again in a lot of ways.
When I came back, it was like reinventing myself. So what I did was I started to give guitar lessons, and I did night school classes, and hit the folk clubs and the pubs. Really, I was playing pubs as well.
Because you're so highly regarded and loved in the folk world, not just because of associations with the Steel Ice Band. You've also played in the Albion Band, haven't you?
The Albion Band. Well, first of all, I teamed up with Ashley Hutchins in the that would be in the mid 90s, I guess. The Ashley Hutchins dance band, and then the Albion Band, and then I left the Albion Band in 2000 or 2001, and then it was Steel after.
But I mean, do you, although you played in these different bands, some of which are very famous, do you prefer to play alone? Or, I know you're playing with Wendy at the moment as a duo, but do you prefer that, or do you like being in a band? Which is the...
It's a hard question to answer, really, because some things are easier, I suppose, or less difficult than other things. Yeah. But a greater challenge.
Yes.
And playing some of the stuff that I play, some of the guitar figures and everything, and remembering everything, it's quite a job sometimes just to lift yourself, to keep that energy. A little, it's not quite so. I wouldn't say difficult. I wouldn't say it's difficult, but there's sometimes, if I'm playing with Wendy, there's more interaction on stage between the two of us. We can have a bit of fun and everything. Sometimes with the solo stuff, it takes an awful lot of focus to play some of those.
Yeah, it's quite tiring. Now, what I want to do, because we know we've had a good chat. We've only scratched the surface of what Ken's done, but and we hope to do it again later on in the year, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to say thanks very much, Ken, for having a chat with me. I've learned a lot, and I hope our watchers have enjoyed it. Well, thank you.
All right, cheers, Jim. Cheers.